All right. Hello. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Health Without the System. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Tim Scott.
And I'm the other host, guys, Mia Scott. Welcome back. We have another really cool episode today.
I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm just going to apologize right off the rip here. I have a cold. We just got back from a Disney cruise. We were around way too many children, and I, of course, brought something back. So it's been a rocky few nights. My daughter is sick as well, and we haven't been sleeping great the last few nights, which leads us to a perfect topic, and that is sleep and how important that is. And it's one of the most important natural medicine that we can do for our body.
I agree. And I really want to focus our listeners back on the fact that this podcast is really about taking your health into your own hands. You know, preventive medicine we've talked about is probably one of the bigger gaps in traditional Western medicine. We really kind of monitor things until you end up sick or until you end up broken. And then we say, oh, here's something to fix it. Sleep is something you can take control of at any point in your life, along with lots of other lifestyle factors such as movement. We talk about your diet. We talk about your stress levels, your social connections, your relationships. Sleep is a big one. It happens every night of your life. We spend a third of our life sleeping. Let's dive into it.
Yeah. And first off, I'll say, because I used to say this saying all the time, is the standard, I will sleep when I'm dead. But the truth is that if, continue to lack sleep, that you will get dead faster. So we'll go into, why sleep is the foundation of health, what happens when you skip it, and how do we kind of reclaim that back and restart our body and circadian rhythm and all the things to follow.
I agree. So first and foremost, let's sort of talk about what your body does while you sleep. And actually, before we jump into that, I don't want to spend a ton of time on the entire cycles of sleep because I think that's outside of the scope of this. But I do think it's important to understand that your body does sort of follow a certain cadence as you sleep throughout the night. So there's a few different stages, but what we talk about the most is non-REM sleep and REM sleep. And it's actually a little bit confusing because your non-REM sleep is actually when you get some of the deeper sleep. But the initial stage one of non-REM is that real light phase. It's really easy to wake people up. And that's when sometimes people will startle. When I do this a lot, when I'm falling asleep, I shake or have a violent, tremor or something. That's that initial stage. Then you get a little bit deeper, and then you get to the stage 3 and 4 of non-REM, which are your actual deep sleep. And we'll talk about what happens during that portion. And after that is then REM, which is when you get muscle paralysis, with the exception of your eyes move around. You're in that active dreaming phase. And that's when you wake up in that phase a lot of times, why those dreams are fresh in your mind. So just understanding the deeper restorative part of sleep actually comes before REM, and then you have REM. And that cycle repeats about 4 to 6 times per night, depending on you, what's going on around you, if you've had alcohol, things like that.
Yeah. And just a fun fact, your body makes you paralyzed during those deep phases during your dreams, so you don't physically act out those dreams. So your body knows what it's doing, and let's dive into each phase. And like I was just telling Tim before we started this, we could go on 3-4 different parts of this sleep topic because it is just so in-depth, probably even more than that. However, we're going to do what we can to kind of, make things more digestible for you. So let's start. What does your body do when you sleep? Number 1, brain detoxification. This is something that I made a post on probably when we first started with Rixa. So a couple years ago, I made a little post on this just because I thought it was so cool. But your brain detoxification when you sleep. So there's something called a lymphatic system, and this will help clear out toxins. And this includes the beta amyloid plaques, which studies have linked to Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that. But without this deep sleep, this lymphatic system doesn't work properly. And basically, when you sleep, your brain goes into like a maintenance mode. So it's time to clean up. And once again, we're just talking about the brain here. And it's really cool because it uses your cerebral spinal fluid. And the video that I did a few years ago was an MRI showing what happens. It's like this swooshing, like waves on a beach, where your cerebral spinal fluid will come up into the brain and kind of wash away these plaques and these toxins and waste products. And if you're not getting that deep sleep, this will not happen.
It's actually a really neat concept. So we think of cerebrospinal fluid down throughout the spine and up in the ventricles of the brain. And what happens is as you sleep at night and your brain shrinks by actually as much as like 60%, the cells in your brain shrink down. And what happens is when this happens, it changes the intracranial pressures and the fluid can actually leave these ventricles, these collection ducts in your brain, and it can come out into the perivessel spaces, so around brain vessels. Then you have these cells you might have heard of called astrocytes, which actually have like little feet on them that can sort of open up, and it lets the cerebrospinal fluid get into the actual cells of your brain, like Mia said. And it's sort of this wave-like movement, and it bathes everything and it collects all that garbage. Then it goes into your lymphatic system within the brain, and then it drains out. So a really cool process if you think about it.
It is, especially if you look at that MRI video and you can physically like watch it in action. Like your body is just so incredible. And what happens is if you're cutting sleep short or you're not letting your body have this lymphatic system drainage, a mechanism that happens, then you can have the buildup of things. You can have memory fog and brain fog and memory impairment and higher risk of neuro issues and degenerative diseases like that. So basically, a lot of people will feel this the next day. It's, of course, not immediate. And then, of course, if you're building up day after day, you can really feel like crud. But even one night of poor sleep leaves more waste in the brain. So when you wake up and you feel groggy and foggy and slow to think the next day, you have to, see, okay, how long did I sleep? Was I allowing my body to get into these deep stages that it needs to do to detoxify? So
agreed. That's probably one of the bigger things. And like you mentioned, yes, you will notice effects every day, that morning effect, that groggy effect, that sometimes where you have to sit up in bed and shake it off versus when the times you've noticed you had a really good night's sleep, maybe you don't have an alarm, your body wakes you up and you're like ready to spring into action. And that's just the way to describe it.
Yep.
Now, another thing that happens, and we'll go into this more too, but a sort of a hormone reset when you sleep. And growth hormone is one of those very important, very versatile hormones, and it does spike during sleep. It's actually pulsatile, and you get releases throughout the day, but you get some of those biggest pulsations at night during sleep. And that is good for tissue repair, muscle building, injury healing, immunity, everything you can think of. And then some of the other things which we'll talk about, cortisol resets overnight, insulin resistance resets overnight, but a lot of different very sensitive and key players reset overnight. So we will jump into that too.
Yeah, it basically, your body is like recalibrating its hormonal network. So when you miss these stages of sleep or lack of sleep or not good quality of sleep, that this basic hormonal regulation can get disrupted. So, and just like Tim named a few, I will go into some of these here. Growth hormone, that's actually one that peaks during your deep sleep. Oddly enough, these growth hormones, they have these as peptides. That's why we can sleep so good when you're on some of these peptides as well. I've cycled a few of these peptides that work very well, but just for sleep. It's great for muscle repair and tissue healing and, fat metabolism, bone strength.
Just to comment on what you're talking about with the peptides. So we've talked about peptides in some of our other podcasts, and these are things that you can get. So the FDA has sort of limited the availability of them. And a lot of times if you buy them now, it's in what's labeled as a research only format. So you're not technically supposed to be injecting them, even though people do. And examples are growth hormone secretagogues and also growth hormone production or growth hormone analogs. And so what they do is they either signal for your pituitary gland to produce more growth hormone or to release it, or you can do combinations of both. And some actual names of those would be like CJC 1295, ipamorelin, tesamorelin. These are things you might have heard of that actually stimulate that. So just so you know what we're talking about when we say peptides.
So if you don't have these deep sleeps or you skip a good sleep, you can immediately see that the GH will never spike. So you'll have slower recovery, higher risk for injury. For athletes, for any athletes who are not sleeping well, those are the ones that are going to be at higher risk for injury and decrease in slow repair as well. So,
Yep.
And of course, worse performance.
Cortisol, the stress hormone, obviously everybody should know that sleep is very important for the stress hormone and your cortisol and your adrenals. So we're not going to get too much into that, but normally it's supposed to drop at night so that your body can relax, and then it rises early in the morning. That's why we do that post-wake, within 30 minutes of waking up, doing that cortisol level when you're trying to test that awakening response. But in poor sleep, those cortisol levels will stay high and your body's going to be stuck in more of a stress mode. And then chronically high cortisol, we've talked about before, things like insulin resistance, belly fat, blood pressure, brain fog, sugar cravings, it's all connected. So again, you want to get sleep to reset that cortisol level. It's almost like your body just hitting that panic button, staying in that souped up mode.
Yep. And cortisol is not a bad guy. It's very important. We've talked about this before. It is technically considered a stress response, but we have to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to support our cortisol so it's not either way under functioning or way over functioning and at the wrong times of the day. So, and sleep can help regulate that as well. The next one is insulin and blood sugar, which I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the, later throughout. But the crazy thing about this is in just one week of short sleep, meaning like 4 to 5 hours a night, which actually for a lot of people that's common, that can make a healthy person look pre-diabetic on labs. That is mind blowing. There's a lot of studies to back this up. And just with a few more sleeps of regenerative sleep, as in like reversing everything that you just did, you can drop those levels again. That is how crucial that sleep can be. Just with a week of 4 to 5 hours of sleep, your labs can essentially look almost pre-diabetic because of that response that your body is having. So very important.
And along with many other things, but poor sleep is actually a diabetes risk factor for this exact reason.
And cravings, which we'll go into as well. It can drive obesity and things like that, but we'll get into that. Another one is testosterone in men.
Should I talk about testosterone? Because I'm basically like walking testosterone.
Have we got your levels tested? What was that? Actually, females, it actually matters a lot about testosterone too.
It does.
And that is an entirely other podcast in itself, but I'm a big advocate.
Is anybody making a list when we say we're going to do another podcast on this? Because somebody needs to let us know. I think we're
keep us
behind.
accountable.
But that is one. I mean, testosterone in general. As a matter of fact, I do think we should make that one of our next podcasts.
We should.
Testosterone is huge. It is especially important in ladies. Getting your levels checked can be crucial. I mean, again, you can also go based off of symptoms if you don't want to spend the money, and we'll talk about that in that episode, but it is important. Sleep-deprived men and women can have...
And women, yeah. Unfortunately, testosterone's geared more towards men because of just the society that we live in, and the FDA doesn't really recognize testosterone for females. I am a huge advocate for this. We also need testosterone. It can keep us living longer and healthier lives and decrease so many risk factors. I will shout out her again, Brandy Sikori at Renewed Therapeutics. She will do testosterone on females.
Yep, look her up, Brandy Sikori.
Your life
Renewed
if you need
Therapeutics. She's very good. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no,
testosterone.
yeah. Whenever you're done interrupting, I'm going to finish my thought. I was talking about how the sleep deprivation can actually lower testosterone levels by, some studies say, as much as 10 to 15%. And over time, this is actually like an aging equivalent, right? So, 10% over X amount of months or years is like aging 10 years. I don't know the exact numbers, but look at it like that. And when you think about it, it's like, holy crap. I'm not only screwing up my cortisol, my growth hormone, my immune system, my tissue repair, but my testosterone, my sex drive, my manliness, and even my femininity, weirdly enough.
Yep.
It's important.
And then that brings us back to the leptin and ghrelin. This is your hunger hormones. This is why it is a big obesity risk factor with lack of sleep. Leptin is this.
Let me share this real quick. Sorry.
Sure.
For leptin and
Who's
ghrelin.
interrupting?
Yes, me. The way I remembered this in medical school, ghrelin signals hunger. And
growling.
Yeah,
Ghrelin
you
is
growl like growling.
Yep.
Growling.
I
So
just
anyway,
say
ghrelin makes you
growling
hungry.
and growling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, leptin signals fullness, so this will rise with good sleep, and ghrelin signals hunger, and this will rise with poor sleep. So sleep deprivation people crave high-calorie, sugar foods, and they can struggle with portion control as well. So once again, this can actually come down to biology, not necessarily willpower. You can have an increase and decrease in the right and wrong hormones due to sleep. You can
Correct.
see how important sleep is, and we are just getting started. Another one, melatonin, which is ironic because that's like one of your major sleep hormones. Did you want to say something? I feel like you want to say something.
No, not really. I like the pineal gland. It's produced in the pineal gland,
Yep.
a cool little gland that we have about the size of an almond, and signals darkness to your cells. Melatonin is very important, as we know. A lot of people confuse this, though. Melatonin is actually, it doesn't put you to sleep. Melatonin helps you stay asleep and achieve those deeper sleep levels. Magnesium has been shown to actually help you fall asleep better than melatonin, but melatonin can help you stay to sleep.
Yeah.
So if you're having trouble falling asleep, melatonin might not necessarily be the answer. If you're having trouble staying asleep, melatonin can help.
And then other things that can suppress melatonin, which we will very well get to at the end of this podcast, but nighttime light exposure, phones, TVs, LED lamps. At nighttime, we've talked about this before. We have red lights in all of our kiddos' rooms and ourselves, just a little red lamp that we bought the red lights on Amazon, and we just changed it, and it's made a world of difference. I feel like the mood, the energy. Our kids are always crazy, but I do feel like it does help kind of bring down their mood a little bit versus the neon crazy bar lights that Tim tried to get the girls one day. And I was like, no,
That's a story for
not
another
at
day.
all.
I was
Anyway.
tricked by Amazon. Anyway, melatonin, one other thing, it is actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but it is a potent antioxidant and it has functions with DNA repair.
Mhm.
It can support immune function by supporting immune cells. And there is some association with lower cancer risks in people who get more quality sleep and have more steady melatonin levels.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool studies with melatonin and decreased cancer risk. So, in speaking of cancer risks, that leads us to our next one of immune defense. So, if you lack sleep, one night of poor sleep will drop your natural killer cells by 70%, and those are your cancer surveillance cells. So, imagine basically I'm going to call them the NK cells, the natural killer cells. They're your body's
They just sound cool, like your natural killer
yeah, I got
cells.
natural killer cells. Yeah, an awesome name to them. And they're basically your cancer patrol. So one night of sleep, meaning only about 4 to 5 hours, your natural killer cells, the cell activity will drop by 70%. Like, I wrap your head around. That means that your immune system will actually miss these misfiring in your rogue cells potentially the next day if you have one bad night of sleep. Mind you, people are doing this multiple nights in a row. You can see the snowball effect on how important on almost every single organism in your body it needs sleep to function well. So, of course, chronic sleep deprivation with the natural killer cells, you're going to be at much greater risk for infections and a much greater risk for cancer, because those killer cells are the ones that go around and target and say, you're not right, you're going to malfunction, or you're going to misfire, or you have the potential to mutate way faster than we'd like you. You're not a good cell. We're going to go ahead and signal you for cellular destruction. And if it's not able to do that, those cells are going to be rogue in your body and have the potential to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, and natural killer cells are just one very important part of your immune system. We already talked about other things that indirectly affect it, such as growth hormone, which has action on your immune system. So these natural killer cells are a type of white blood cell, they're a type of lymphocyte. You have different portions of that immune system. So again, this is only one aspect, but there are multiple different aspects of the immune system affected by sleep, and we'll get into a little bit more of it as we go.
Yep.
One of them here is antibodies, and that's when you're actually building those antibodies. And then we'll also talk about like memory, not only in your brain, but in cells as you sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly like you said. Which, I mean, imagine that when you're sick. This just happened to me last night. Yesterday was probably one of the worst days of the cold. It only lasted about 24 hours of the severe. And last night I went to bed a little bit early. I had a really good night's sleep and I woke up feeling so much better. And you have to contribute all of these things. My cells are able to perform its job. My brain is able to clear the sludge out. My body is also able to make all of those antibodies to these whatever virus I'm fighting. You wake up and you feel 10 times better than you did going to bed. So your body knows what it's doing. You just have to give it the right environment.
Real quick brain break. Before we went to sleep, we started watching that Netflix documentary, Unknown Number.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, we got to finish that. But if anybody's
only
watched that
halfway
out there,
through.
yeah, it's pretty wild. Anyway,
I'm excited
totally
for that.
not related. Sorry.
Well, we should probably get through this podcast quickly so we can watch it.
Yep.
Just kidding. All right, next is, excuse me, inflammation balance. Sleep helps regulate your cytokines, which we've talked about many times. Your cytokines are good and bad little boogers in their right state, but they're basically chemical messengers of immunity, and they can do marvelous, healing, although they can also do destruction, and you do not want your body living in an inflamed state. So without enough sleep, you're not going to have good balanced inflammation. You're not going to have enough to fight infection and, be able to protect yourself from things that can harm you.
Yeah, I mean, this again kind of goes along with some of the other things we've been saying. And this is also just one portion. I mean, you start talking about some of these inflammatory cytokines, but we can also take that one step further and talk about gene control and transcription, turning certain things on and off. We talk about how, genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. This is one of those environmental triggers, right? You might be genetically predisposed to create some of these inflammatory cytokines. But if you get the right amount of sleep, you can build up growth hormone, some natural immunity, get good melatonin, which is a potent antioxidant. You start to put all these things together and you can see how good guys can outweigh bad guys. So again, just tells you, you might think you have a bad deck of cards with your genetics, but there's a lot of things you can do in your life to help prevent that trigger from being pulled.
Yeah. And this is something that we already touched about a little bit with the immunity with our cells, but your body will have immune memory. So just like your brain, it consolidates learning at night, so does your immune system. So that's like the antibodies and things like that. But it also can help with thoughts. You can remember things better. I think I talk about that a little bit later. I'm reading through my notes here, but it's very cool how your body will just store these like memory properties. So the next time you come in contact with something that your body recognizes as not good, you are much able to, or you're better to fight it faster, quicker, and stronger.
Definitely. So now we're going to talk just a little bit about some of at least one stage of sleep. We're going to talk about dream sleep or your REM. And this is when your brain is sort of processing emotions and consolidating memories throughout the day. Without REM, you're more anxious, you're reactive, you're forgetful, you might snap on your kids a little bit more. You know, those things that you don't necessarily want. REM is good for that. We say memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and creativity. Those are all keys during REM. Now, just a quick reminder, you're generally going to have REM cycles that last from 10 minutes to 1 hour, and it usually occurs after those deep sleep non-REM cycles, which could take up to a couple hours. So usually it's at least 90 minutes into sleep before you hit REM. Again, this is why it's important to make sure you're getting uninterrupted sleep. If you're being woken up by a baby every 60 minutes, that's going to affect your memory consolidation, your emotional regulation, and your creativity.
Yeah, and I can speak on that because I tell you what, it is rough when the kids are sick or whatever. This was just 2 nights ago when Lola was getting up. She got up at like 4 times, and we woke up the next morning and Tim's like, how'd you sleep? And I'm like, terrible. How did you sleep? He's like a baby. I'm like, well, not our baby because she was up 4 times. He didn't even hear it. But it's crazy because, of course, I have to get up with her. And the next day, I feel terrible. I feel like I feel like I worked a night shift. And shout out to all of our night shift workers. It's taking,
You are not good at those.
it's taking years off of your life, but I could not do night shift at all. And I'll get into that a little bit, but it was really hard for me. That was probably a good 8 months of my life where I was in such a fog. I couldn't remember the day. It was just terrible, but I was working 3A to 3P. It wasn't the actual night. Of course, I worked at a level 1 trauma center in the ER, so I was awake during my shifts because you're, saving people's lives, but it was when you got home. I was super moody. My appetite was changing. It just really wrecked my life. So,
And one other cool thing is your body kind of knows to shift. So earlier in the night, earlier in your sleep cycles, you're actually going to spend more time in the deeper non-REM stages. So you're going to get some of those deeper cycles there where you're working on actual physical recovery, your cells recover, your muscles recover, and things like that. And then as it gets closer to morning, those cycles get shorter and your REM cycles actually get a little bit longer. And then of course you wake up, and that's why most of us remember a dream while we wake up in the morning.
So essentially for REM sleep, it's therapy for your brain. During the stage, your brain will replay emotional memories as well without the flood of an actual stress chemical, which I find it is so fascinating that your body can replay these memories. For example, when you get startled in your dream or things like that, it's not actually a stress response, even though it feels like it might be. They call it, REM is therapy for your brain, which is just so wild.
I agree. I think it's pretty cool. And also I like that this is sort of how, how people say sleep on it, because you always think about things different after a night of sleep. You're not as angry, you're not as passionate, you're not as emotional. Again, that's because your brain has worked through it during REM sleep in a non-stress situation. You're asleep, it takes away all the emotional triggers, it runs through it, you process it, you wake up, and some people, they might be in a completely different, maybe even more angry state. Other people process it and, usually have a different reaction. That's also why, you might feel a little bit different after you sent a text message late at night that you maybe shouldn't have sent, or an email, maybe when you were fired up. And I am a victim of, I'm not a victim. I am a person who has habitually regretted things that I've said because I don't always have a great filter. So I've learned to sleep on it more often than I used to, though still not always.
I agree with that. We can go ahead and kind of just go quickly through some of these things. Like he said, memory and learning. REM, it consolidates your emotional memory as well. That's why, sleeping on things, you can kind of change how you feel in the morning. The brain and body connection, that's a really cool one as well. REM will strengthen connections between your emotional brain, which happens in your amygdala, and your rational brain, which is in your prefrontal cortex. And this kind of keeps things balanced and your emotions regulated, and can really be stability for a lot of people. And little statistic for you, sleep-deprived people have up to 60% more activity in the amygdala. And what happens there? Fear, anger, panic center, which is why that some people, when they have lack of sleep, they can be incredibly irritable, explode, like Tim said, on kids or whatever the case may be. So imagine that if you're chronically not getting sleep and this is a problem for you, you're also going to be not a nice person. So.
Agreed. All right, we're kind of deep into this. So let's start talking about the cost of skimping on sleep. So we mentioned first off blood sugar issues. just 6 nights, so essentially 1 week of only 4 hours of sleep, will reflect pre-diabetes on blood work of an otherwise non-diabetic, metabolically normal person. Restoring sleep does reverse it, as we discussed, but that's a very interesting fact, because what if you don't ever restore it? What if you're continuing like that? What is the continual toll?
And what if you're already diabetic and then start to not sleep well? Because, ironic, it's a double-edged sword, because if you're diabetic, you can have nighttime wakenings in the middle of the night due to an increase in cortisol response at the wrong time. So it is a double-edged sword when it comes to that one. So
heart health, less than 6 hours per night can double the risk of heart attack and stroke over time. So during sleep, your blood pressure actually drops naturally by 10 to 20%. And that nightly dip actually sort of reduces some of that resistance on your heart, improves cardiac output, and gives you a chance to rest metabolically and cardiovascularly.
Yep. And if that dip never happens, then your heart can continue to work in overload and overtime all the time. So chronic stress loss basically equals a higher baseline blood pressure. Then you're at increased risk for diseases like heart disease, stroke, things like that. Also, heart rhythm. This is another interesting one. This has happened to me multiple times. If you have a bad night of sleep, the next day, once in a while, especially even after coffee, I will experience heart palpitations. And this is because sleep will actually regulate your autonomic nervous system, which is the balance between your fight and flight response versus the rest and digest. And with enough sleep, you have a parasympathetic system that will dominate. So it'll slow your heart rate, your body can recover. But with poor sleep, you can have a sympathetic dominant system. So that's where you can get the stress mode, increased risk factors for arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats, those heart palpitations. And then for some people, if it's bad enough and you already have a weakened heart, this could be a lethal arrhythmia.
Yeah.
So,
and these sort of abnormal sleep patterns could be measured if you're checking blood work. Abnormal cortisol levels. We've said this before. 1 cortisol is essentially no cortisol. If you can at least test, if you're going to do 1, it needs to at least be your cortisol awakening response, but you need a curve. You need to understand the cortisol curve. So anyway, just plugging that in there. But yeah, you could be doing cortisol testing. You could test inflammatory markers like CRP or high sensitivity CRP. Those things could be elevated with poor sleep. Now, other things are going to contribute that as well. So you can't just test cortisol or inflammatory markers and say, oh, they must be high, I'm sleeping bad. But it's one thing, it's one piece to the puzzle, right? And it can independently drive some of those things towards abnormal.
Yep. And just to clarify, when Tim says that 1 cortisol test basically equals no cortisol, I see this a lot with providers that I'll get patients that will have their labs done and they'll have a single cortisol draw. And I will ask them, when did you get this done? Oh, at my lunch break or whatever. Number one, if it's just 1, like he said, it's not going to be an accurate picture. You're not giving that curve. You're not getting a good 24-hour snapshot of what your body is doing and responding to. There's so many different cortisol patterns. So when a provider is ordering just 1, like Tim said, it should be the very first thing in the morning. That's really hard to do because it's usually within 30 minutes of waking up, and you can't really get to a lab in time.
It almost has to be a salivary kit.
Right.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that. If you need some information on that, we can do cortisol testings. Tim and I just got our 6-point cortisol test done a couple months ago, and I've talked about that before, but I digress.
Yeah. We've also talked about the obesity link, how the poor sleep raises ghrelin, which makes you hungry, and lowers leptin, your fullness signals. Again, makes you sort of crave the worst foods. We've talked about the immune system. You're going to be more likely to catch colds because you're not having that reactive immune response that you need, like if you were well rested.
Yeah, you're much more likely to get sick if you're not sleeping well, chronically. So the other statistic that I found, fact that I found crazy, for a driving risk, 18 to 20 hours awake will impair you as much as driving legally drunk. Which is that even as being legally drunk. Sorry, I can't even read my own statistic here.
Yeah.
Driving risk, 18 to 20 hours awake impairs you as much as being legally drunk. This is crazy because I remember all the time when Tim would pull like long shifts or working back-to-back shifts and driving home late at night or traveling. And I mean, he could barely keep his eyes open, like rolling the windows down and just doing whatever you can to like physically stay alive.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like rocking all over the place and getting places like no idea how I got there.
Right. Like you would just wake up and you'd be like, how? Like, and I say wake up because I mean, he actually will fall asleep at the wheel, which is in story in itself.
Not really anymore, but.
Yeah, no, not anymore. I'm talking about your days when you travel for work. So it's very important that you're getting your sleep. So anyway, translation, sleep loss doesn't make you just tired. It makes you sick, heavy, forgetful, and of course, dangerous if you're driving. So let's talk a little bit real quick on other things that could be wrecking our sleep because, of course, these are immediate things that we can fix. Number 1, screens and blue light.
That's probably one of your favorites to regulate in people because people don't think about it.
Yeah. Yep. So screens and blue light, this will suppress melatonin like we discussed, the hormone that says basically it's time, it's dark time, it's time to sleep. So make sure that you're doing everything that you can to turn your screens off sooner. Bright lights, the LEDs, those need to be gone hours before bed.
For our friends watching us do this podcast at home, you'll notice that Mia's wearing glasses. Mia does not have prescription lenses.
Yep.
Those are actually blue light glasses that she wears almost all day, every day, because she spends a lot of time on the computer.
I do. And these are like my less crazy looking ones. I have some upstairs that are like my really bulky Blu-ray or blue light blocking. They actually block so many different things. But it was funny. I joined a Zoom call the other day and I had them on. I wasn't even thinking. They're like an artificial, like an ambient look to it, the lens. And I joined the meeting and someone was like, "Are you wearing sunglasses?" And I was like, "No, oh, I totally forgot I had these on. Normally I had these on." But very important, protect your eyes if you're on screens all day. I actually used to wear these in the ER as well when I would chart for very long periods of time. So it does make a difference. I used to get headaches with this. So whatever you can do to reduce that light, that blue light. Another thing is caffeine. This is huge. It has a half-life of 6 hours. So if you're taking your last or drinking your last cup at 3 p.m., you have to know that is still going to be active in your system at even 9 p.m. So tread lightly with that one. You know, if you say that you're not sensitive, that's fine. I don't have anything against caffeine unless you have major adrenal issues or need to work on that. But just know it can disrupt.
Right. Caffeine is not a bad guy.
No.
Caffeine actually has a lot of positive metabolic effects. It would be a cool podcast for us to do.
Yep.
But anyway,
add it to the list.
Point being, there are some benefits of caffeine, even though it technically is a drug. Just know if you're struggling with things like your adrenals are out of whack, you're not sleeping well, then it is definitely something you have to reduce or get off of for a while. Now, alcohol, on the other hand, I'm sorry, but that is a bad guy. Yeah. There's really no positive
zero benefit to alcohol. And for those of you who say, which I've said this before,
what about my red wine?
I want my resveratrol. Then you get a supplement because you're basically
isn't it? It's 100 bottles or something,
it's
or 100 glasses.
The amount of red wine that you would need to be a beneficial resveratrol level would be. You would die. You would just die.
You just say
don't do it.
You don't. And Mia, you can attest to this. We very rarely drink alcohol nowadays. Every time you do, you say, "I don't know why I had alcohol. I slept horrible. I woke up all night."
I will wake up at 2, 3, 4. It's tossing and turning. I just don't even feel rested at all the next day. And I don't attribute that to getting old. I attribute that to we stopped drinking years ago, and now when I even dabble in it a little bit, it's not fun.
Yeah,
it's not worth it.
Late night eating. So digestion is something that can compete with repair, especially in your gut. We talk about, we are, big proponents of intermittent fasting. That rest and relaxation allows your gut to clean things out. But a heavy meal at 10 p.m. is going to affect your sleep quality, as it is going to throw off all these hormones we've talked about, the leptin, the ghrelin, cortisol. So it's not a good insulin. So it's just not a good thing to do.
Yeah. If there's food in your stomach, your body's first priority is to work on digesting that food. It's not going to care about getting rid of waste or anything like that. I tell my patients this all the time. That's why you shouldn't snack at late at night, because your body can't go into that rest and digest, or it is in that digest mode, and it's not going to go into that cellular clean house, autophagy, all of the things that you really need. So try to avoid that if you can, a few hours before bed, and then even light exposure to your room. Of course, in the summer, it's a little bit different. You kind of just go with the circadian rhythm, honestly, like a dark shade or things like that. If you're a night sleeper, that can help. Not a night sleeper. If you're a night worker and have to sleep during the day, that can actually kind of trick your body to not have that cortisol spike if it's a dark room. So just keep that in mind. If you are a night shifter and have to sleep in the light, it might be best for you to have a night
this is
black shade.
Probably out of the scope of this podcast, and I'll spell it out just in case anyone has their kids listening, but PORN can actually affect your sleep cycles as well.
Oh yeah.
So there's some interesting studies out there, and if anyone's interested, I can share it. Just reach out to us.
Yeah. There's a lot of studies on a lot of that, how that can impact you. But okay, so next we're going to we already talked about actually, this is just science that might blow your mind.
Oh, yeah, these were just some interesting
I'm a huge, science nerd geek. I'm like, let's just include some things in here. So circadian rhythm, every cell in your body has a clock. Out of sync routines like late nights or regular meals. This will confuse your metabolism, mood, and like we said, increase risk cancer. I've talked about this before. Night shift workers, your nurses, your truck drivers, factory workers, you will absolutely have higher rates of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and cancer, because biologically you are just destroying yourself. And it sucks because you have to have ERs open at night. I mean, there's really no way around it.
There's certain jobs that are just always going to have to be done at night. You're the brave souls who do them. I'm included, but I only do a couple night shifts a month. We talked about melatonin's power, its antioxidants, its DNA protection. We've talked about memory and learning associated with deep sleep and REM integrating emotions. So all of those are important. But kids and teens, so poor sleep can actually mimic ADHD. Again, we've talked about focus, mood swings, hyperactivity. It makes sense. You don't always have to jump to a specific diagnosis such as ADHD, especially if this is like, my kid never really had this problem. Now all of a sudden I'm noticing this, and maybe they're preteen, teenage years, junior high. Do they have a phone in their room, a computer? Are they staying up all night on TikTok? Are they, chatting with friends? Look at sleep.
Yeah.
It's important.
And that's teens. And if we rewind to kids and, like little kids, especially if you are having ADHD symptoms, number one, I mean, this is going to be an entire podcast in itself, so add that to the list, but make sure that you're looking at dyes and high fructose corn syrup and processed food, all of that. That is also going to disrupt sleep and things of that nature and mimic those behavioral issues, but that's another topic for itself.
So tell our listening audience what they can do. How can you reclaim and take the power back, get your sleep under control?
Yeah, consistent schedule. Number one, bed, whenever you go to bed, whenever you wake up, it should be the same time every day. This will actually train your circadian rhythm. This was a big one for me. And honestly, I thank my kids for regulating me with this one. I used to be like, let's sleep in, it's the weekend. That doesn't exist for me, but quite honestly, it's made me a better person. I feel like I have more energy because of it, because I'm on a very strict sleeping regimen now. And for people who say, like, there's actually tons of information or educational articles and things like that, where if you are, let's say, Monday through Friday in a set schedule and then Saturday and Sunday you sleep in, it is so much harder on Monday morning when you have to wake up because you didn't train your, like, even just those few days of being off can throw your body out of alignment. So try to stick to the same time, whatever that looks like every single day for you. Wind down routines. We've talked about dimming your lights, reading, stretching, whatever is going to be, meditation. We've talked about how Tim and I play, what the heck is it called?
Insight Timer. It's a free app, and we usually circle between guided meditations and music. So like sleep music. Last night we did Thunder and Rain. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, but they have these ones that like will be a guided meditation. So you kind of just listen to what they're saying.
Close your eyes.
Yeah.
Enter a world of sleep. Feel your body on the pillow.
And then I make it till about then and I'm falling asleep. But Tim will be like, that was good. And I'm like, it's not sawing logs.
Yeah, I used to fall asleep in the first few minutes. Now I usually make it about halfway through each of them.
Yeah, it's good. That's the new one that we've added. I mean, actually, not even new. We've been doing that for months.
It's been for a while,
if not years. Screen cutoff, aim for at least an hour before bed. We get that if you guys are like us and are glued to every source of electronic possible due to work. It can be hard, but try to limit that.
We don't get that one. We watch TV generally till we go to bed.
Yeah,
so we could be better at that.
I mean, but we do take about 20 minutes to that meditation. But
yeah.
But that is what it is. Blue light blockers, like we talked about for glasses. A cool, dark, quiet room. Optimal would be 65.
Did that say cool? Quiet
I knew it.
room?
I knew he
cool.
was going to say something about this. Optimal sleep temperature is 65 to 68. If my room was 65, I would be in a parka and bibs and probably something on my ears.
So the only reason I don't want it to be 65 to 68 is because I would never feel your body against me.
Yeah,
again.
that would be.
Otherwise,
yeah,
yes.
I would. There's just no way. So temperature does matter, and we can have all of our windows open. I do like a cool breeze, but 65 would be basically an Alaskan tundra.
That actually reminds me, we talked about this in the other podcast, but there are some cool devices out there if you do struggle with sleep and temperature. There's things that change the temperature of each side. We mentioned 8 Sleep. It's a company, and last time, I've actually heard about it 50 times since the last time we talked about it.
It's because you mentioned their name.
Yeah,
so many
their
ads.
most expensive device is like $5,000. I think their other generation's a couple grand, so it's too rich for our blood right now, but I would like to look into it.
Yeah, it's like AI. It'll get to know your body and the temperature and the best sleep that you have, and then it adjusts. It's by partner, so your partner can be a separate
Also, other things that don't just do sleep, but do give you a lot of sleep data, such as an Oura Ring, OURA, if people haven't heard of that. And the new one is the Whoop Band, which I just purchased, and I'm going to do that. They do lots of different data points, but give you a ton of information on your sleep. And so I'm excited to share my process with that with our audience.
Yeah. Another one is they actually have a note in here for white noise, although I way rather prefer brown noise. This was something interesting that I did with Lincoln when he was a baby. I would play white noise and he would wake up in these like weird terrors in the middle of the night. And I started to look into that, and white noise can actually, because it's all like on brain wavelengths, it can throw them into a flight response or a fight and flight response where they get like basically terrified. So I changed to brown noise. Yes, there's this thing. It's so crazy the difference, but it's different frequencies. And I have all of my kids on that now, and they're great with it.
Yeah, and
So
I actually like the sound of it better.
I
If
do
you
too.
listen to the white noise is like the
Well, now when I listen to white noise,
It's
I mean, we've been
annoying, yeah.
we've been listening to brown noise for years now with the kids, and now when I listen to white noise, it's like exactly, it's annoying.
yeah.
It's like
It's like
it's
in brown
irritating.
noises more like it reminds
A
me of the
whooshing,
womb.
a womb,
It's the womb,
exactly.
like
Yep, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Okay, caffeine cutoff. We said to stop at least before 2 p.m. If you can before that would be even great. But also, if you are constantly having to have coffee all throughout the day, we should assess other habits and what you're doing to need that coffee throughout the entire day.
Agreed.
But that's another podcast in itself. Add it to the list. Morning sunlight, 10 to 15 minutes within an hour of waking. I did this all summer long. My kiddo would be up at the booty crack of dawn. I'd pour myself a cup of coffee. I'd go out and sit under our gazebo when the temperature was still amazing and nice and cool, and I would sit and get some sun on us. Morning sun and afternoon, as in like later evening sun, I guess I should say, is the best time of day to get it. The rays are not so harmful, and sun is not the bad guy. And it can also regulate your circadian rhythm. It can help your adrenals. It can help regulate your cortisol so much.
So can some of the other things that we've discussed many times, such as red light grounding and intermittent cold plunges. You shouldn't necessarily do that every day, but 2 to 3 times a week is good.
Don't cold plunge if you have uncontrolled thyroid issues. It can make things worse.
Agreed.
What else do I got for you? Warm shower or bath. This can raise body temperature, then cool it. I'm also a big fan of cold plunge in general, but like I said, some people should not be doing that. And I think that's the majority of things there.
The takeaways here.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Sleep is free medicine. Guys, we always talk about what we can do to change our life for the better with the things that we have, and sleep is so powerful. And I'm not talking about 12 to 15 hours. We're talking about a solid 7 hours. I think 6 to 8 is what the average is. Aim for 7.
Yeah, 7+ is what I tell people to aim for. The average is 6 to 8, but you should be getting 7+.
Yep. An extra 30 to 60 minutes per night can lower blood pressure, improve mood, and reduce cravings. You know, skipping sleep is not,
strength. It's not manly. It's not cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to sleep.
Yeah,
It's self-sabotage. It's, that's like saying I don't need anything but French fries. Well, yeah, you really do.
Yep. Sleep like your life depends on it, because it does.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to say is that, just a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. It's not a substitute for professional care, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Remember that you have the power. Please join in if you want to get more knowledge. And please, friends, like us if you enjoy this, share this content, and recommend us to a friend. We are really enjoying getting this message out. We appreciate all your feedback and support.
Yep. And if you didn't like us, tell us why. And tune in next time for our 21st episode. I think this was a longer one, but we appreciate you guys following along. We'll be back next week for
So we'll have
the
some more
shenanigans.
podcasts. And I made a list. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys. See you later. Have a good one.